and recording. Yay! I am very excited. Tonight we have Sarah Prineas, and we are here to celebrate Trouble in the Stars, her new book, which, yay, her new book is out in the world, and this is only a one-day late. Happy book birthday to this new book. So yay, Trouble in the Stars is officially out in the world. And she is going to be joined in conversation this evening with Greg van Eekhout, who is a very long-term friend of Mysterious Galaxy. So Greg, we are happy to have you here as our moderator tonight. So thank you for joining us as well. And just to give you a little intro into both of our authors, Sarah is the author of the Magic Thief series, the Winterling trilogy, Ash and Bramble and Rose and Thorn, and Heart of the Land from the Spirit Animal series. She lives in rural Iowa with her husband, 2 kids, and 2 cats. Shout out to the left for cats. We have 2 fluffy kitties in my home as well. And then you can visit Sarah online at Sarah. Oh my goodness, my brain. Prineas.com. And then Greg van Eekhout I was like, woo, that was a big brain fart to have. And then Greg is the author of Voyage of the Dogs and Cog. He lives in San Diego with his astronomy/physics professor wife and 2 dogs who I have to say are adorably cute. We have gotten to see them in the store. He's worked as an educational software developer, ice cream scooper, part-time college instructor, and telemarketer. Being a writer is the only job he's ever actually liked. And then you can find out more about Greg at www.writingandsnacks.com, which is an amazing name. And also, for those of you who are interested in those links, if you click the purchase book button, it'll take you to a page that also has the author link. So not only can you support these amazing authors and their books, which I highly recommend you do, you can also find out more a little bit of their behind the scenes of the life of an author as well. Oh, hello, Tiffany. Thank you for joining us. But that is going to sum up my intro just for house rules. As many of you know, the Van White section, we have to the right-hand side our general chat, which Tiffany is lovingly saying hello to us in. So shout back out to you, Tiffany. And then if you look down below, it will say ask a question, as the name of that would imply. Indeed, that is where you can ask a question. I highly recommend you ask our authors questions. The best part of events is that you get to interact with them. So make sure you take advantage of that. And then we already went over how you can support these new books and where you can purchase them, the purchase book button down below. And on that note, I'm going to pass it off to you, Greg, and I will see you guys at the end of the event. Goodbye.
Thanks, Constance.
Thanks, Constance. And it's so nice to be at Mysterious Galaxy in
Gosh, it looks like we're sitting right next to each other. It's spooky.
It is spooky.
Like I poke you.
Yeah, don't poke me. I wish I had some like fries or something that I could throw at you.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Like beer battered fries. Okay.
Stop. Yeah.
So I'm hearing myself echo. I'm not hearing Sarah echo. So if I get discombobbled, that's because I'm hearing myself, but I'm going to try to pretend that everything's perfect.
I don't hear you echoing.
Okay, that is just me. All right. Well, I want to just get into this book. Okay, so first of all, I love this book. I'm a Sarah Prineas fan of the writer, not the person.
Not the human.
But this is a joyful book. It's just my jam. It's science fiction. It's actually middle grade science fiction in space with aliens and spaceships and all that stuff. But it's also a very human story about people. So I would have bought this book not knowing anything about Sarah. But knowing about Sarah, I had to buy it because otherwise I'd be embarrassed to tell her I hadn't bought her book. Okay, so what's going on here? There is some kind of, I don't know, is that a spaceship window? Is that a terrarium? Are these people very small, like in a fish bowl? Why don't you tell me?
Oh, I can tell you. Okay, you point to stuff in the on the cover, and I'll tell people what it is.
Yeah,
so
that's the plan.
The window behind them is really
right.
like, I thought we were going to get sued by George Lucas because it looks like the front window of the Millennium Falcon, which I think is kind of awesome. But we didn't get sued, so that was really good.
Not yet.
No, not Okay, so go ahead. So in the
Who's
middle
this person
here,
with the gooey fingers?
that's Trouble. Trouble is a shapeshifter, a kid shapeshifter. Their fingers aren't actually literally goo, but that was a good graphical way to show you that this particular kid can change their shape.
They're a shapeshifter.
Because they're a shapeshifter.
Okay.
And can take different shapes.
All right. And why are they in space on a spaceship?
Because that's where the story happens.
Oh my God. Okay. So this is they are a space voyager.
Okay. Yes. This is all happening in our galaxy, but out in the reaches of space in our galaxy, and probably far in the future, or like Star Wars in a galaxy, well, a long time ago. But anyway, here now. Basically the spaceship is the main setting of the book. They're traveling from one place to another on this little tin can spaceship that's kind of dented and scored with being hit by meteors and space dust and stuff. The thing about a crummy spaceship like that is that it could also be kind of cozy, and it can be home in the middle of the darkness of space. And so that is a much better answer to your question of why it's on a spaceship.
It really is. I thought this was going to go downhill so fast. Thank you for answering the question. Oh, God. All right. So I just want to go around this colorful cast of characters. So this is
that's
tile.
Rita. She's a Lizardian. She is the crew's communications expert, and the irony in that is that she is monosyllabic, so she only speaks in one word sentences, and she also is highly observant, and she knows things about Trouble that even Trouble does not know about themselves. So she's just kind of like, I think, secretly laughing at everything that's happening, but very blank-faced. And then over there, that's Shaka, who is Shaka. She's an insectoid, and she's one of 3 Shakas who are the engineer on the ship. And
okay,
good, yeah.
And there's some like sort of Gorgony, Medusa-looking person.
That's Electra. She is a Tentaclodian, and her hair, put her hair up really close to the screen. Like I'll do it like that. There. Okay. Oh, you're doing it. So you see how Electra has sort of like snaky hair. Those are like tentacly, except that they turn colors depending on her emotions. So they're tentacles. Tentacles that change color are tentacles.
That totally makes absolute sense.
So anyway, Electra is a pilot, a DART pilot. So she's like flies a tiny, dangerous spaceship. And she is sort of an antagonist, but like reluctant friend.
Okay, so you said a DART pilot, like throwing darts.
Yeah, like a little spaceship. Yeah. Tall person.
Let's move through this quickly. I want to ask you
okay.
questions.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's Ambi. Ambi is the navigator, and their name is like 12 syllables long and impossible to pronounce by humans. So they call that person, them, Ambi. Yeah. And then in the middle.
Can you do the 12 syllables? Can you actually?
No, and you know what? I cannot. And I'm really glad that the people who made the audiobook did not ask me, because I couldn't tell them. Because I'm human, I can't pronounce alien names.
That makes sense.
And then in the middle, probably so that's Captain Astra. She is the captain of that spaceship. She's kind of dry and edgy. She likes the darkness of space, and she becomes a sort of reluctant mother figure to Trouble after Trouble goes away on her spaceship.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a key question about Trouble, and then one of the things that's best about your books is your voice, your authorial voice is so lively and energetic and fun. So after you answer this question, maybe you could read a little for us.
Yeah. You know what's really funny about that, Greg, is that it's nothing like me. Like, I'm not lively or fun at all. How do I, you know? Anyway, okay. Go ahead. So what's
the exact opposite. What does Trouble want and what does trouble need? Because I feel these are like some key questions that tell us.
Yeah, I like that question. So trouble at the beginning of the story does not know who they are. And even ask that question, like, I know I'm looking for something, they say. But they don't really know what that is. And I think the two things that trouble sort of wants and needs is he really wants to find out they want to find out who they are. And to find out if there are any other beings in the galaxy like them. Like, are there any other shapeshifters, or is Trouble the only one? And of course, what Trouble really needs is a home. And so this is a book that's partly about a quest for self, and it's also about a quest for home.
Yeah, and it's really one of those books that makes you laugh and cheer, and maybe a little weepy, and often on the same paragraph, same sentence.
If I think you're kind of required to cry at the very end of this book. I know
you're required.
Yeah.
What happens if you don't?
Yeah, I know. My agent said she cried at the end. She might even.
Yeah, that's a huge compliment.
Yeah. I want you.
So what are you going to read?
Book. I said I want everybody to cry at the end of this book, like with happiness, happy tears. Okay.
That's a laudable goal. It's making people feel something, even those of us who are dead inside and numbed to the world.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you going to read first?
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to read the first chapter. So don't be alarmed, because I know readings can sometimes be a little long. This is literally 5 minutes. The chapters of this book are short, and I think that makes it a good read. And I will say too, this book is written in the first person, so I'm reading as Trouble. So this is Trouble's voice. What'd you say? Sprightly something, Greg? Lively, yeah.
Energetic.
And at the beginning of this book, Trouble is in their blob of goo form, and they're going to explain what that means and kind of some of the very beginning of their adventure in trying to find out where they're coming from and where they're going. So this is from chapter 1 of Trouble in the Stars. Outer space is dark and empty and silent, and it's really, really big. There are stars, but they are distant and cold. You can drift through space for a long time without meeting up with anything. You could drift for so long that you might forget where you came from and where you are going. I am a shapeshifter. Currently, I am traveling through space in the form of a blob of goo. In this form, I'm about the size of a large rat, but without shape or color, like a big squishy amoeba. After a long, lonely time floating through the cold, dark, silent nothingness, I detect a space station. When I'm in my blob form, I don't have eyes, so I don't see exactly. But as I get nearer, I can sense that the station is shaped like a huge ring, spinning slowly, brilliantly lit against the darkness. For someone like me, a space station means danger. It also means warmth and light and other beings and food. Don't worry. I don't mean that the other beings are my food. I am a shapeshifter and I am very hungry, but I don't eat people. Slowly, I drift closer to the station. Closer. You know what a pseudopod is? Yeah, that's right. It's like a fake leg or a fake arm. It's just my goo stretching out so I can hold on to things and pull myself along. As I drift right up close to the station, I extend a couple of pseudopods and grab on. Then I ooze along until I find a hatch, a door leading from outer space to inside the station. Molecule by molecule, I ooze through the crack and inside. I rest, clinging to a ceiling in a corridor in my blob form, feeling very hungry. People who live on the station pass below without noticing me. There are insectoids with shiny exoskeletons and scaly lizardians with big beady eyes, and humanoids with skin that is lavender or brown or peachy pale or tinged with green. Then along comes a young humanoid with brown skin, pointed ears, and blue hair. Following her is a smaller creature. It's cute and fluffy and has a pink tongue that hangs out of its long snout, and it has a frondy tail. I know this kind of animal. It's a dog. As they walk below me, I sense that the small humanoid reaches out and pats the dog on the head. Then she pulls something from her pocket. Food. It's a little piece of food. She feeds it to the dog, and the dog's tail wags and wags and wags. After they pause, I wait until nobody's coming, and I drop to the floor of the corridor and shift into a new shape. Cute, fluffy, 4 paws, floppy ears, sad eyes. That's me, a dog puppy. I practice wagging my tail. I figure out how to walk with 4 paws. I practice making sounds. A whine, a yip, a growl, a bark. And then I set off to find somebody who will pat me on the head and feed me treats, somebody I can wag my tail at. I figure I'll have the best luck on the station's docks, a cavernously huge, cold, bright place that is lined with shops and bars and restaurants. It's busy with people from all over the galaxy. It's noisy and interesting, but none of it's colorful because dog eyes mostly see in black and white. I spend a lot of time going up to people, wagging my tail and being adorable and fluffy, but all I get is kicked and shouted at. Everybody's too busy rushing around doing important things. They don't have time for a puppy. I'm getting better at scrounging for scraps and finding warm places to sleep when something on the docks starts smelling strange, different, and slightly wrong. I crouch behind a cargo pod, the deck cold under my belly, and with my keen puppy nose, I sniff the air. It smells like danger. The danger smell makes me feel prickly all over, and it makes me remember 3 things that the long, dark cold of space made me forget until just now. 1, I am fleeing from something, but I don't know what. 2, I'm trying to find something, but I don't know what that is either. 3, I am a shapeshifter, but I am the only one.
Thank you so much.
Chapter 1.
I've read the book, of course, and I think I want to get the audiobook too, because there's something about your style and the way you sound and the rhythm of your sentences that make it such a great, like, audible experience. So thank you for reading for us. So why don't we back up?
Okay.
And you can tell us about your journey as a writer. Did you want to be a writer since you were a tiny little Sarah?
Funnily, I did, but I didn't believe that actual people were writers. So I wrote all kinds of things when I was a kid. And you know how we do as authors, like we go to schools and we do Zoom visits or whatever, and we talk to kids and like they get to meet us and ask us questions, kind of like we're doing now. And when I was a kid, I never met an author. And so I really never actually quite believed that the people who wrote the books that I loved so much were actual literal people. So I didn't believe I wrote, but I never thought about being a writer. And I kind of wrote off and on. But it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I really was like, oh, this is this thing that I really, really want to do. So it took me a long, long, long time to finally figure out that this was a thing that I could do and actually make it my career.
You know, when we met, I don't think either of us had finished any novels. We were short story writers trying to figure out how to write novels. Yeah. And then you did, and it got published, The Magic Thief. one of how many books in that series?
A 4-book series. Yep.
4-book series. How have you as a novelist changed between Magic Thief and Trouble in the Stars?
Well, when I wrote Magic Thief, I did not know it was a children's book. So I have since then totally embraced my identity as a children's book writer. So that's been really fun. I would say, just the continuing refinement of the craft. I don't think I've changed all that much in terms of, the things that I love to write. I know more about what I'm doing. It's less intuitive and more intentional now than it used to be. But I'm really conscious of the way, for me, when I'm working on plot, when I'm thinking about plot, it's very much tied up with the character. And it's very much, I structure plot in order to elicit emotions in the reader. And so when you say you cry at the end of the book, like, that's what I want to happen. Like, I'm much more intentional in that kind of work that I do now than I used to.
So you've developed a skill set that is about eliciting emotion in the reader, which is an actual skill set. I don't know if this is maybe a hard question to answer. What are some of the tools you use, or what are some of the methods you use to get that emotion out of a reader?
I think it's a lot of times not really putting it on the page, but like making, this is hard to describe. I mean, you're getting in the weeds here, Greg. But like putting things on the page and letting the reader make the connection between those things, like not beating them over the head with it. But like in this particular book, I lay out this kind of feeling early in the book that's revisited a couple times, and then it doesn't pay off until the very end. And that kind of release of information is, I hate to say calculated, but really carefully, considered in order to elicit that. What we do as authors, like manipulating the reader all the time, right? So I've gotten much better at manipulation.
In some ways, you're a better writer because you've become a worse person. So I'm going to dip into audience questions at the bottom of the hour, so in just a few minutes. So people in the chat, you can hit that Ask a Question tab, ask a question. You can also read questions that other people have put in, and if you like that question, you really like the answer, you can click a upvote arrow, and I'll try to prioritize the ones that are more popular. So what came first? Let's just back up. Your previous 12 books were fantasy, and this is 13 books in. This is your very first science fiction. Did you have a desire to write science fiction and you came up with a character and a plot, a world, and a story that was science fiction? Or did you come up with a character of trouble and you realized this character needs to be in a science fictional setting?
No, you know what? I decided I wanted to write science fiction because I had done 12 fantasy novels and I thought, hey, it's time to do something different. And so the setting was the first idea. And I really did want to go with my strengths to try in this new genre. I started writing and then I thought, maybe this is too different from what I've been doing. Maybe I should do this as a fantasy and make, take the whole thing and like put it into a fantasy world, but it just didn't work. It really needed to be in space, partly because one of the kind of thematic things that goes on in this book is this idea of perspective. When you are one tiny, tiny person in the vast reaches of the galaxy, that makes you feel really different about like what home is and what it means to be with other people, because it's so cold out there and so empty out there. So space, like the setting, became really essential to what the book was becoming as I was writing. And I kind of realized like all of this makes people, like their society and the way they behave and, interacting with people who are not human and, all of that changes the way kind of characters behave and stuff. So that was all, the setting was hugely important to answer your question, I think.
Yeah, great answer. Was there something that felt substantially different about writing science fiction versus fantasy?
Well, in fantasy, when you're writing fantasy, you just can make it all up, right? I mean, if you want to have dragons in your fantasy, you can make up the rules of dragons, and it's not contingent on anything else. It's just whatever you want to do. And I've done that before. But in science fiction, you do have some science that actually governs what happens. And so I actually did have to do a little bit of research, which I don't usually have to do. The other thing about science fiction is that some of the terminology in science fiction can be a little bit tough for new readers to take on, like the concept of the vastness of space. I mean, it's more than our brains can really understand, but other things too, like why spaceships have an airlock, and what that is, and what happens if you go out of a spaceship into space in your human form. Like, what happens to your human body when that happens?
It's not good.
It's not good. No, it's really bad. So there's some concepts there, kind of like the way in the first chapter, Trouble says, what a pseudopod is. This is what a pseudopod is, right? Trouble does similar kinds of things throughout the book, addresses the reader directly, and introduces these concepts that are based in science and are real, that the reader kind of needs to know about, and hopefully in ways that make it really accessible. That was what I was hoping with that. So I think your question was like, how is it different? So more facts, more science. And there's more science in science fiction than there is in fantasy.
Would you say? Yeah. It's the task of exposition is a little more difficult or just different, and you used Trouble's voice as an expository tool.
Yes. Yeah.
Just another question about science fiction. What are some of your touchstones in science fiction, either in literature or in film or animation, that influenced you?
Animation. Yeah. Oh, look, there's a little spaceship dude. Wait, which dude is that?
It's Chopper.
Oh, it's Chopper. I love Chopper.
Chopper and Keen and Jarrus.
Oh, gosh, don't even. I can't. Did you guys watch Rebels? Because that's what we're talking about, Star Wars Rebels. Greg and I and two other friends watched the entire series of Star Wars Rebels together. That was actually after I'd written this book. But Star Wars is an influence for me, which is one of the reasons I'm kind of psyched that the not copyrighted Millennium Falcon is on the front. The reason I like Star Wars, and the other one is Firefly, which I'm not crazy about Joss Whedon, and I'm actually not crazy about the story itself. Like the vibe of that is that it's kind of like it's science fiction, and it's not all shiny, neat, tidy spaceships. It's like spaceships that have been, have all kinds of wear. They've been through a lot, bits fall off of them, when you're flying through space. I love that about Star Wars and about Firefly, that that it feels like real and like people actually inhabit these spaces, because they're not pristine. So those are two big influences. Pretty much. I mean that. Yeah.
And you get a sense of that with what's the spaceship called in Trouble in the Stars?
The Hindsight.
The Hindsight.
Yeah.
I have to change the name of the spaceship in my next book pitch, because I think I almost ripped that off. So
Jen gave me the idea and I forgot to give her credit for that. Last time I did a reading with another friend, Jen, and it's a great spaceship name. Tiffany just said, that's a great spaceship name. It really is. And Trouble asks about what it means, and the captain's like, it means better next time. So I was just like, this is the perfect name.
Well, that completely ties into what you like about the apparatus in Star Wars and Firefly, because the hardware has been through a story. It wasn't just created on page one for this story.
Right.
There's a history and a sense of verisimilitude. I love that.
Yeah.
Here's a writer question, who's the reader, not your ideal reader, but who's the kind of person or the kind of kid that you most hope will read your book?
Oh, well, okay. So, I hope all kids will find it accessible and fun. But the very first time I mentioned this book, this was months ago. I was talking to a class about a different book in Connecticut, and I said, hey, I'm going to show you guys the cover of my next book. Nobody's seen it before. And I showed it to them, and I said, this is Trouble. They are a shapeshifter. And I used the they, them pronouns because Trouble's gender changes depending on what shape they're in. 2 kids in the class absolutely lit up. They went, like me, Trouble's gender fluid, just like me. And they felt seen. And it was this wonderful moment, which I hadn't really expected. But it was really a wonderful moment. It was really sweet and it really made me very, very happy. So I'm hoping, all kids will see themselves in Trouble.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm hoping that, kids who are, are exploring their identities will also really, really identify with Trouble as well.
And I love that it comes in the package of this really great, fun, imaginative adventure. It's a joyful experience reading this book, and I hope it'll be joyful for them. I'm going to go into audience questions, and let's see, here's one with an upvote. Trouble is such a great name for the character. Was that always the name, or did you realize it after you started writing?
Yeah, so sometimes when I'm writing, I think of something like the Tentacles, right? And I cackle with glee when I think of them, like hee hee hee. So the finding Trouble's name was that kind of moment for me, because Trouble is taken on board this spaceship, the Hindsight, and the captain's sort of like, oh, this one's Trouble, and I realized that, and Trouble doesn't have a name. They're like, oh, that's my name. Trouble's my name. So the captain kind of names Trouble inadvertently, and it was fun. So because the other thing that's fun about Trouble's name is there are all these sayings like, here comes trouble, and oh, you were asking for trouble, or don't get into any trouble, and so it's kind of like recurring jokes about Trouble's name.
Does it say here comes trouble on the cover? It doesn't, but it will on the movie poster.
Opportunity. Oh no, but it does say Trouble is in trouble. So
okay, then we're good. And reminder, folks, if you have questions, pop into the Ask the Question doobly-doo and type a little question. Let's see. This one comes from Barry Summy. Hi, Barry. What does a writing day look like for each of you? What does a writing day look like for you, Sarah?
Well, let's see. I get up and I go to crew practice at 5:30 in the morning, and I row, and then I do my other job, which is a political job, and I hang out with Greg and some other friends on Slack, and I do the crossword puzzle. So stuff like that. Yeah. So basically what I'm saying is, like, I don't have a typical writing day. I do a lot of other stuff. And sometimes, like, I can go for weeks and weeks without writing at all. And then when I get seized by an idea, I'm like, then there's nothing else happening. It's just, I write all the time and wake up in the middle of the night and write. And it's like this brain dump. And so there's no typical, or then there's also no discipline. So what about you, Greg?
Yeah, we're the actual opposite, because first of all, I don't exercise in the morning or much ever. And I also don't get up early in the morning because that's gross and weird. And also, but I'm a workman-like writer. I get up, and it doesn't matter how many words that day I write. I have to write pretty much every day, or I forget how. I have inspiration to do it for a few hours every day, and if I don't do it, then I forget what writing is. I don't want to do it anymore. So yeah, we're the exact opposite, which is probably why you're so successful. We'll just leave that there. how do you approach sci-fi world building in middle grade novels? Do you find yourself cutting a lot of explanation? So yeah, I mean, I think you sort of addressed that a little bit, but are there things that, like, do you talk about how the engines work? Do you talk about relativity and time dilation?
Yeah. I think my editor might be on this, but she will remember and I will remember. They were constantly trying to make me make it clear how far apart things were and how long it would take to get from point A to point B. And I was totally hand wavy about it. Like, I don't know how the engine works. It just works. And then there's this one point where I think this is in the first book because there is a sequel, but I think it's in the first book. They use this little device called a stealth pocket or something like that. I can't remember what I called it. But anyway, it's a way for the spaceship to like fold space around it to hide. And Trouble's like, asks the captain, hey, how does that work? And the captain's like, I don't know, science. Somebody else in the crew knows how it works. I don't know how it works. So yeah, there was a lot of hand wavy stuff, but I mean, I think in a lot of science fiction, you can have hard science fiction that's really like trying to extrapolate and, dig into like how might an interstellar drive work. This is not that book.
By the way, your editor, Kelsey Murphy, waves hello in the chat.
Oh, hi, Kelsey. Sorry about being difficult with this timing.
What scene or section brought you the most joy to write?
Which scene or section brought me the most joy? I did the most cackling when I wrote this one section where Trouble has not been in their human boy form for very long. And they're in this room and trying to figure out, like, what are all these parts of the human body, like ears. Ears are so weird. There's these protuberances and they filter sound into your hearing mechanism. And I almost felt like I was writing a Greg van Eekhout scene actually in that because there was some moments there. It was just funny, and, like, toes and eyes. There's like Trouble's main point in the scene is like humans are really weird.
I mean, if you look at a foot and think that it's like an evolved hand, it's weird.
Yeah,
it's just like that big toe is a thumb.
Those are so weird.
Oh,
yeah. And Trouble's in a male form. He's like, why are the reproductive organs on the outside? It's so
it makes total no sense, does it?
It makes no sense. Anyway, that was my favorite scene to write because I just was cracking myself up the whole time. But the very last scene of the book too, because I really had built like the emotional trajectory of this book to land in this one place, and it was so satisfying to reach that point and to I really feel like I nailed the ending of this book, and getting there was just so satisfying. So those two things.
Do you write linearly? With my echo, that is a really weird word to hear. Linearly.
How do I write linearly?
Yeah, so you go from beginning to the end.
Yeah, I do, because I don't I kind of have this feeling I know what's going to happen on that last scene, and not in the climax, but I'm talking the denouement. That's where the payoff is for me. Is that little post-action scene. But getting to that point, I generally don't know. I don't know how I'm going to get there till I'm actually writing it. So I do write linearly early.
Okay, I'm sorry I used that word. Well, that kind of segues into your process overall. So the usual question I ask is: are you a pantser, or are you a plotter / outliner? Maybe you could explain those terms for people that aren't writers.
Okay, yeah. So. So some writers are very disciplined, and they will write an outline, and they'll have a sheet of information about their characters, like what their favorite colors are and all that stuff. And then there are pantsers, who are people who wear pants while they're writing, and also who just write and just figure it out as they're going along. And I am that kind of writer, the kind of writer who seriously, when I start a book, I don't know what the plot is. And it really does take shape as I get to know the characters and what they want, what they need, which we asked earlier. and you know, kind of, yeah. So Panzer, not very disciplined, just basically splatting it all out there. The other thing I do, though, is I do write recursively. So I'm writing along, and then I figure something out, and I actually go back and fix stuff. So it's like this sort of forward, backwards, forwards, backwards, forwards.
You don't find yourself, you okay? You're going to fall. you don't find yourself in a trap of polishing, and never moving forward. How do you avoid that?
Well, I want to find out what happens, so I have to go forward because I love my characters and I want to find out what happens to them. So I generally don't fall into the polishing trap.
In the chat, Takako, hi Takako, college friend, asks, is Panzer from writing by the seat of their pants, maybe?
Yes. That's exactly right. Yep.
And then who knows what the origin of that phrase is, because like,
by the seat of your pants.
It's just you're sitting, right? I mean, it's just sitting, I guess. Okay.
I don't know.
All right. We are ill-equipped to answer that part of your unasked question, Takako. Apologies. Which secondary character was the most fun to write, and which one was the most challenging?
Ooh, wow. Okay. Well, the secondary character that was hardest for me to write is the villain, General Smag. Villains are just, I just channeled Donald Trump and made him the captain of a spaceship, and that was not fun to write. And so the one that was most rewarding, that was the second part of it.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So probably, and this is going to be a little bit, well, whatever, but Captain Astro was super fun to write. When I do school visits, a lot of times the kids ask, like, which is the character who's most like you that you've ever written? And I never really have written myself into a book, but Captain Astra is the person who is the most like me that I've written, because she's kind of edgy and she drinks a lot of coffee, like coffee is what she's on. And she's just, she's not an easy person, and I'm probably more extroverted than she is, but I had a good time with her, like, reluctance to take this kid on, so she was fun. She was super fun to write as a secondary character. Yeah.
I just gotta say, General Smag is a classic Prinean character name, General Smag. Yeah. As soon as you hear that name, Smag, you know that you don't like that person. It's
he's a bad guy.
Yeah, that's a bad dude. If you had to live one day in this world that you've created, what would you want to go do and see?
Oh, wow. I think just the funny thing about this particular science fictional world, I talked earlier about perspective and how the galaxy is vast, right? But when you're traveling through the vastness of the galaxy, you're on this spaceship and it's like 4 rooms. It's this tiny little cozy space in the midst of the vastness of space. So I would say, like, oh, I am on a spaceship, but that's like being in a house. I think the thing, if I could, in this world, and this comes out much more in the second book, is, and I would have to predicate that by saying the rules say that I have to be able to survive this thing that I want to do, like whatever it is. I would like to see a black hole in person. Black holes are amazing galactic phenomenon, intergalactic phenomenon. I mean, they're so cool and so interesting. And I would love to kind of see one in action without getting spaghettified and squished into oblivion, which is what would happen if you really did see one.
Okay, so if the rules of physics and reality were completely different,
right,
that is something that you would risk doing.
Yeah. Seeing a black hole.
Since you've mentioned the next book, that leads into my next question. What are plans for the future in your bibliography?
Oh, well, yeah. So there is a second Trouble book. which is done. It's written. It's called Asking for Trouble, and I assume it will be out about this time next year. And then we'll see what happens. I have some ideas for other books. I have an idea for another trouble book, if that happens to be something that could happen. And so, yeah, I mean, just basically writing and having fun writing. Yeah.
So, looking a little.
Wait. What's up next for you?
Oh, thank you for the opportunity to show my work. It's a book called Weird Kid. It is about, strangely, it's about an alien who's a shapeshifter who travels in the form of goo.
Totally coincidental.
I did finish my book first, I will say. It wasn't very, totally coincidental, very different books. Mine takes place on Earth, present day, suburbs of Arizona, very different. But that's coming out, Weird Kid. It's coming out in July 20th. Yeah. Thank you for that. But back to you. Broader in terms of what's coming next. You've written books about wizards and books about dragons and now books with spaceships. Is there anything on the horizon that you still want to write about, like a someday book?
Sunday book?
Someday.
Oh,
Now, what are you writing on Sunday? You do write books pretty quickly.
Yeah. I would really like to write a girl power book. I have tried. And I haven't been able to get there yet. And because I think about, things can be tough for a girl. When they realize that this is not a girl's world, right? And I want to write about that transition and that part of a girl's life. And how I get to do that, I don't know. But that's kind of in the back brain project. The thing that I would like to do. Yeah.
And you've written some YA, but for the most part, I think 11 of your 13 books are middle grade.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself sticking with middle grade forever? And if so, why? What is it about middle grade?
Well,
and then we should maybe define middle grade for people.
Right. So middle grade is for ages about 8 to 12 or 10 and up. Sort of that, not quite in middle school. And then YA is, gradations of YA are from like middle school up through adults. I mean, and the thing is adults read middle grade and they read YA and whatever. So these are just marketing categories. They're really not reader categories. And I would say that like when I'm writing a book and I'm, writing a middle grade, I'm not so much thinking, oh, this is just for kids. I'm thinking, oh, this is so cool and fun. And I love this adventure. And I love the story. And it happens to be directed at kid readers. But as I told you, like my first book was like that. And I didn't know it was a kid's book. It was just all my favorite stuff in a book. And so I think if you are trying to intentionally like write for children, you can end up, like talking down or, being a little condescending in your approach or like putting lessons in. Don't put lessons in your book for kids. No. So I don't know. Did I answer your question, Greg? I forget. Yes, I was talking and I
totally did. I just asked why you like writing the kind of books you like writing, and you totally answered that.
Yeah,
you're the expert in that subject. I know that there are probably some writers in the chat, or people who are aspiring writers, or people with kids who might want to be writers. And let's actually address it at the kids. You're 13 novels in, you're a successful, seasoned veteran pro. What is your advice to kids who want to do what you do?
Oh, I do have advice for kids who are writers. And one of the pieces of advice comes from you, Greg. And I will say it without the profanity. Okay. So my first piece of advice is if you start writing something, try to finish it. Because I know that especially when you're young, you're super creative. You're like, oh, you're working on this thing. And you're like, oh, shiny, I'm going to go work on this other thing. And then you never get a sense of the arc of a story and like that ending place. So try to finish what you start. The second piece of advice I would give is to try to find people that you trust that you can trade writing with, and you can help each other learn to be a better writer. Because I found I learned just as much from giving a critique as I do from receiving one. And my third piece of advice from Greg van Eekhout is never give up, never surrender. Writing is really hard, and you just have to keep trying and keep at it. Be persistent.
Sarah, I think that's an incredible piece of very wise advice. It is a little better with the profanity. I think this was appropriate for this venue. Yes. Okay, we're running out of time, but I'm going to keep asking questions as long as we have them. Is it hard to write in such an intimate way in first person with an alien main character?
Oh yeah, it is interesting writing in the first person, because you really are pushing really close to the emotional experience of that character. And I find when I am working on that, when I'm writing in the first person, I really inhabit the perspective of that character and the point of view of that character. And you're right. It can be very limiting because you can only know what that character knows. In The Magic Thief, I wrote in the first person, and I got around that by having letters from other characters interspersed, so I could talk about what was going on in some of the other parts of the world or the city in that case. So yeah, like having that first person is limited, but I also feel like it really lets you just sink into that character and make the character the most important thing about the book. Because Trouble really is, for me, like the setting is really important and interesting. The other characters I love, but Trouble is really the center of this book. Yeah.
About the other characters, it's not like a arbitrary decision how many supporting characters you have and who they are. So how did you come up with this cast of secondary characters?
Oh, well, partly because the spaceship needs crew. So, we needed a cargo officer, and we needed a communications specialist, and we needed a navigation specialist. So, a lot of that was kind of dictated by the needs of the ship.
Okay, that you made it easy on yourself. That's almost like cheating. I'm going to rip that idea off too. 13 books. I see that there are common themes, common threads, or at least touchstone ideas throughout all those books. What is your perception of what those are? And then I'll tell you if you're right or wrong.
Okay. I have definitely some themes that are revisited in my books. One is that search for home comes up in a lot, or not always home, but sometimes place, like a certain place where you fit in. And that comes up not in all my books, but in some, in some form, in some of them. So that's just one of those like emotionally resonant things for me as a writer. Another thing that comes up in every single one of my books is people that change into animals. I don't know what it is. I think it was because at a very young age, I was influenced by The Once and Future King by T.H. White. And I don't know if you remember in the beginning of that book, Merlin is teaching Wart how to be a good king. And he does it by changing Wart into different animals, into a goose and into a little fish and so on. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And so for some reason, like all of my books, there are people who are animals. I think I'm also just really interested in and it does come out in this book, like, what does it mean to be human? Like, we live in this world with other creatures. We're human. We're different from them, but are we the same as they are too in some ways? So, yeah. Also, I know you have dogs. My bio is out of date that Constance read at the beginning because I have a dog and he's the best dog in the world. And he's like a person. Yeah. I mean, so yeah. So those are two of the kind of themes. The other theme, I think, I ripped off from J.R.R. Tolkien, and I think you see this in a lot of middle grade books too, which is that one small person can make a difference in the world. And you know, we live in a world right now where it can feel like there are huge forces arrayed against us, and we don't get a pass because of that. We still have to do the things that we can do.
Yeah.
So, and that's really important to me, and shows up in a lot of my books. Did I get them all? Did I miss any?
There's one that you alluded to, and it maybe is that Search for Home, but it's kind of related to that. But I think there's always some sort of form of comfort in your book, whether it's a blanket, something to keep you warm, and more often than not, it's food.
Yes.
Food.
Oh, I couldn't talk about this last night because my mom was on. I hope she's not here tonight. But when I was a kid, my mother was a terrible, terrible, terrible cook. Just the worst. Like, I'm sorry, Mom, if you're on, but
I don't think she's here.
She knows. I actually, even in one of the Magic Thief books, I even put one of the horrible things that she made in the book as a inside joke for my sisters. Like food was just always like about, you know, comfort and so I remember going to college and being like, dorm food is the best thing ever because it was not my mother's cooking. So food is definitely something, not in every book, but certainly the other thing with Trouble is that they've never inhabited a human form before. And so they've never tasted anything the way humans taste things. And humans, as it happens in this world, they don't taste better. They experience taste better than most other creatures. And so food is a revelation for Trouble the first time they eat stew.
The food is always some of my favorite parts of your books. We're running out of time. I want to get this question in. Thematically, what does shape-shifting mean to you or mean in this book?
Yeah. Well, you know, one of the things I've been thinking about, I have 2 kids and they are both in their 20s. And I know every parent who is on this call knows this, which is that kids are shapeshifters. Every kid is a shapeshifter. And I have a little picture of my son, Theo. Look at how
my gosh. He was so little.
He was so little and cute. And now he's this hulking 6-foot tall, beardy person. It doesn't look, he's not this anymore, you know? And like thinking of how they move from like being a larva to being a fully realized person is amazing. And so part of the reason Trouble is a shapeshifter is because every kid is a shapeshifter. So that was a fun, kind of funny. There are some like inside jokes about that, I think, for parents. If you read this book, you're going to go like, oh yeah.
I know you, for weird reasons, that you want to withhold information from us because you're mean. You don't want to reveal too much about the next Trouble book. But for those of us who've already read Trouble in Stars or are going to soon, can you just give us a teaser, a hint, a lure?
Okay, so one of the things that we find out about Trouble, well, you heard it in the first chapter, is the Trouble is hungry a lot. And there's a reason for that. Now, Trouble thinks the reason is because when they change shape, it requires a lot of energy. And so eating fuels the shape-shifting. Well, it turns out that is not the reason why Trouble is so hungry. And we also really don't know where Trouble came from. And so the second book is going to look into those questions. The other thing I really wanted to do in the second book was see Trouble interact with other kids. So in the first book, he's got his little family. In the second book, he's like got his squad, you know, and and there's some cool stuff in the second book. It was really fun to write.
A whole bunch of little troublemakers.
Yeah, so to speak.
Wow, it is 5:59. We've talked a lot. Was there consequences on the screen to tell us to shut up? Great time.
I don't want to tell you to shut up because this is such a fun conversation. I'm like, you guys can keep talking. That's okay. I'll just sit here and we can keep listening. Because let's see, in the span of an hour, you've made us almost cry with the first chapter of a book. You've given us brilliant writing advice. You've given us amazing characters. And you've also let us see into the amazing and awesome relationship the two of you have as authors. And also, it wouldn't be an event without a spontaneous animal saying hello from afar.
It's not even mine.
It's like your neighbor's dog or something.
Sorry. I can't even tell them to shut up.
The amount of times I've had like a cut, like my cat's butt be what greeted someone, I'm like, I'm so sorry. That is not.
I texted my husband and asked him to make sure my dog was not barking during this. So.
Yeah, the animal introductions are just, they're a thing. But getting back to the main topic of how this was such an amazing event, and just thank you, Sarah and Greg, for spending this evening with us. This was such a treat. Both of you are such great authors, and Middle Grade 2 is such a very special, it's just such a special group of books that reach such a special age of readers. And so thank you guys for putting amazing content out there for the youth, as I'm getting older that I call them. But thank you so much for these great books for young readers. And everyone, like we said earlier, books are for all ages. I am totally a fan of that. I still read throughout every age genre. A good story is a good story. So whether you are a wee little one yourself or whether you are as old as Gandalf, I would highly recommend you pick up these books and go read Trouble in the Stars. And thank you so much, Sarah and Greg. This was such a pleasure having you tonight. And oh no, did my video disappear? Oh, can you guys hear me? I'm so sorry.
I can see and hear you.
Hear you.
Oh no, sentimental outro has been ruined. Well, I will finish with a dramatic voiceover. Thank you so very, very much for joining us. And we will see you all next time, and have a great evening, Sarah and Greg. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming, everybody. Thanks for doing this, Greg.
Thanks for asking me to do it. It was a privilege.
Yeah, thanks, Constance, for hosting.
Thanks, Constance.
And now we're going to the awkward exit, right?
Yep, now is the awkward exit.